Deputy Boyd Barrett.
Yeah, Minister, I just want to add my voice of support for Deputy Doherty's amendment around the issue of the vacant tax and the urgency, the vacant unit or vacant home tax. The urgency around this simply cannot be overstated. And let me just put a human face on it for you, because often when we're debating these financial matters, it's dry figures, statistics and so on. In the long litany of cases I have walking into my office every single week in absolutely dire circumstances, this week I had a young woman in her early 20s who has been homeless with her young child, who's now 5.5, for 2.5 years. She has been in 8 different emergency accommodations. One of those was the Clondalkin Sunnis homeless accommodation, where there was a fire, and as you know, one mother was killed, 3 babies were killed, and the young woman who came in to me was in that hostel and was very close friends with the woman who died. She is completely traumatised, as is her son, and she is still in emergency accommodation. Her son is now in his 3rd school in 2.5 years, utterly traumatised by it, and they still have no idea when they're going to be housed. And signs on it, given the state of the list in Down, it could be years. Years. She broke down several times in my office, just completely unable to cope, blaming herself, because she thought, am I a terrible mother that I would put my child through this? And is there any prospect, is there any hope for me to get a secure roof over my head for myself and my son? Now, side by side with that, close to the emergency accommodation she's in now, I highlighted this case before, but I suspect it's the tip of the iceberg. I highlighted recently a block of apartments in Sandyford, Ballalley, the Robin Hill Apartments, that have been owned by NAMA since NAMA was set up, where they have been sitting on 15 to 20 empty units since they took it over from whatever developer they took over the loans of. Recently then, NAMA sold it to a vulture fund who then tried to evict the rest of the tenants. But all the while, there were 15 to 20 apartments sitting empty, while people like that young woman and her child and so many others are going through that trauma. Now, could there be anything more urgent than putting human beings like that young mother and her child into those empty apartments? Because really, for ordinary people, it's as simple as that. It is obscene that NAMA were sitting on those empty apartments. And it's worth saying that Dún Laoghaire approached NAMA and asked them could they have those apartments. And NAMA said no. You can't have them. But yet they remain there sitting empty, while there's people being traumatised and put through hell like this young woman. Now, it seems to me that setting aside the debates, very interesting debates, about is there 180,000 empty units as the CSO suggest, or is it a percentage of that, 10%, 20%, 30%? I don't know. But we have to find out, and we have to find out as a matter of urgency. And it is unconscionable, because there's no debates about probate or anything like that there. There is maybe a debate about what conditionality should have been put on the offloading of NAMA assets, or whether NAMA assets should ever have been offloaded in the teeth of a housing crisis like this. But either way, it is simply unconscionable that there are units sitting out there, empty, perfectly habitable, that people like that young woman could be living in. And instead, she is breaking down as a human being. And the damage being done to her child is just impossible to fathom or to calculate. So I would suggest that the urgency Deputy Doherty has already tried to inject into this question. I would echo that and say it's just not good enough if the government isn't going to move as a matter of absolute urgency to ensure that not a single unit out there that could be inhabited by people who are at the sharp end of this appalling housing emergency, that any obstacles to getting them housed in these empty units are removed as a matter of urgency. And whatever measures have to be taken, whatever taxes, penalties have to be imposed in order to get those properties for the people who need them must be taken, and they must be taken now, because we've been talking about this for years. So this is a very modest effort within the constraints of the finance bill and what we're allowed to propose, because we can't propose things that are charging the Exchequer, to compel the government to do something about this obscenity of empty units sitting side by side with human misery and human tragedy. So I would appeal to you, Minister, take it on board and do something on this matter.
Thanks, Deputy. The Minister has already many times.